I woke up that day with a light, almost teenage confidence that I would finally do it. I would get out of the house not for work, not for another duty visit to the grocery store, but for myself. For my own pleasure. After months of endless reports, calls, overdue deadlines, and shipping invoices, for the first time I allowed myself a morning coffee that wasn't spilled on the keyboard in a hurry, but was calmly drunk by the window, overlooking the bare trees of Spring Hill. The day was gray and humid, and the sky hung over the roofs of the houses like a heavy blanket, but I felt light, rare, like a morning rainbow in December. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. I signed up for the Haven on Main salon a week ago, postponing this decision several times for reasons that now seem silly. Work, family matters, and fatigue all paled in comparison to my reflection in the mirror when Kelsey's stylist brushed the last strands off her face and said, "Well, Emily. A fresh look for a new version of you." I smiled, not quite believing that these words meant anything, but feeling a faint but sincere response coming from inside. A new version of me. Why not? I paid, thanked Kelsey warmly, and went outside, wrapping myself in my navy wool scarf. It was cool outside, and the air felt like a taut string, transparent and sonorous. The wind tickled my face, forcing me to press the collar of my coat to my cheeks, and I walked along the main street, looking at the windows of small local shops. Inside, one shop sold handmade scented candles, another cozy scarves and gloves, and a third antique, bound books. The whole city center was like a live postcard. Christmas lights were already hanging over the doors, the windows were decorated with fir branches and cones, and the smell of cloves and cinnamon was in the air. I slowed my pace, looking at my reflection in the window of a home decor store. Her hair framed her face neatly, dark brown with soft golden highlights. I looked really good. Calm. Almost happy. But at that moment, I didn't notice how I approached a section of sidewalk covered with a thin, almost invisible crust of ice. One step, another, and suddenly the ground gave way. Everything happened instantly. There was no time to be scared. There wasn't even a thought, just the feeling that I was in the air, that gravity was no longer listening to me, and then, a sharp blow. The pain shot through me instantly, sharp, almost blinding. I wheezed, unable to scream, and clenched my teeth, feeling as if something inside my leg had shifted, disrupted its order. "Oh my God," the woman's voice cut through the air. Through a veil of tears, I saw a face above me, distorted with anxiety. "Are you okay?" I tried to sit up, but as soon as I tried to put my weight on my right leg, a flash of white, boiling pain squeezed me, as if someone had put a red-hot iron rod into the bone. I think I broke something," I gasped, almost fainting. A tall man in a leather jacket approached the woman and sat down next to her. "Don't move. Please don't move. I'll call an ambulance. Liz, hold her hand, okay?" The woman, Liz, squeezed my fingers in hers. Her hand was warm, and I clutched it like a lifeline. The man walked away, took out his phone and began dictating the address. I lay there, soaked from the melting snow, feeling like I was shaking from pain and cold. People passed by, someone stopped, someone offered a blanket, someone just looked at them with sympathy. The ambulance arrived quickly. The paramedic, an elderly man with soft eyes, bent over me. "Miss, we'll carefully lift you onto the stretcher, okay? Try not to move. Everything will be fine." I just nodded, feeling tears running down my cheeks, from pain, from shock, from absolute powerlessness. They put in 4 with painkillers inside the car, and the world swam slightly. The pain receded, becoming distant, cloudy. I closed my eyes. I got an X-ray at the hospital, and the doctor, a woman with glasses and sharp features, came back with an image. "You have a clean fracture of the tibia, just below the knee. They'll put a cast on you. You'll have to wear it for about 6 to 8 weeks. No strain on the leg. Just crutches. 6 to 8 weeks. It sounded like a sentence. I nodded, unable to speak. Soon I had a plaster cast, white, thick, bulky. At first, a splint was applied, then a cast, and then they helped me move into a wheelchair. A hospital employee ordered me a taxi, and I left the hospital late at night, holding onto the plastic handle of a bag containing recommendation papers and a couple of pain pills. The drive home was quiet, the driver hardly spoke. He helped me to the porch, and then I climbed on crutches, step by step, cursing every inch of the way. I was sweating by the time I got to the door. My body, tired and tortured, could barely hold on. I opened the door, entered the house, warm, silent, serene, and suddenly felt the whole gravity of the situation crashing down on me with renewed force. I'm alone. All alone. The house, which had always seemed cozy, was now full of obstacles: the high side of the bathroom, the kitchen in the far corner, the steps to the veranda. Even getting to the couch seemed like a feat. I sank down on the pillow, stretching out my sore leg, and, pressing my palms to my face, closed my eyes. I didn't want to call anyone, not my parents, not Sharon. They wouldn't understand anyway. They wouldn't have been sympathetic. Her mother would probably just shake her head and say something like, "That's because you're always in a hurry," but Sharon would have found a way to make it my fault. I took a deep breath. I had to get ready. I'll think about it tomorrow. I'll find a way to adapt tomorrow. I've always found it. But today I just let myself be weak. Just a little bit. I woke up to the sound of an insistent bell ringing, shrill and intrusive, as if someone was trying to reach not only my phone, but also the very core of my consciousness. The room was in semi-darkness, light barely penetrated through the curtains, and only the faint creaking of wood in the wind reminded of the outside world. I reached for the phone lying on the bedside table, catching it with the edge of my fingers and dropping it on my stomach. Sharon's name was on the screen. My heart sank, as if anticipating that there would be no support or care in this call. I answered, holding the phone to my ear, my voice still unawakened, hoarse. "Hello? Emily, hi." My sister's voice was fast, confident, almost commanding. "Listen, I have an urgent matter here. I'll give you a ride with Ben for a couple of days, okay?" What? I blinked, not immediately sure if I'd heard correctly. Wait, are you serious? My leg is in a cast, I can barely reach the kitchen. Yes, I know you fell, broke your leg, she interrupted me with slight irritation. Mom mentioned it. But, Emily, it's not cancer. You just can't walk, but as far as I understand, can you still sit? I was silent, feeling something angry, thick, and long suppressed begin to boil inside. You love Ben. He's cute, he doesn't cause problems. Just sit with him. He will play on the tablet, eat, sleep. That's it. Sharon, I tried to speak calmly, I can't. I literally can't keep up with him. If he runs into another room, I won't catch up. If he spills something or makes a mess, I won't be able to clean it up. Even cooking for myself is a challenge, and you want me to take care of a 5-year-old child? There was a short pause on the other end of the line, and then her voice turned colder. You just don't want to. That's laziness, Emily. You always find excuses when it comes to helping. Especially if it concerns me. It's not an excuse, I whispered, feeling a lump rise in my throat. This is reality. I broke my leg, Sharon. It's painful. I cannot. You would have done it if you really wanted to, she snapped and hung up. I stared at the phone as if it could give me an explanation, as if it could decipher what had just happened. It was hard for me to believe that my own sister, knowing what I was going through, could be so insensitive. I put down my phone and, in complete silence, as if inside a vacuum, hobbled on crutches to the kitchen to make myself a cup of tea. My hands were shaking, and even this simple action was exhausting. Less than an hour later, the phone rang again. This time it's Mom. I exhaled, pressing my forehead against the wall. She picked up the phone again. Emily, are you making yourself look like a victim again? June began with her typical peremptory intonation, in which the reproach always sounded louder than any words. Mom, I'm not. Don't interrupt me, she snapped. Your sister is in a desperate situation. She has an important meeting. She needs help. You're her family. And what are you doing? You refuse. Because of what? Because of the leg? God, you're not paralyzed. Have you ever thought about how I feel? My voice faltered, but I continued. I fell. It was scary. I couldn't get up. I had to lie on the cold sidewalk until strangers called an ambulance. I came home with a cast on my entire leg. I can barely walk. I don't even know how to do laundry or wash dishes. And all of you, Sharon, act like I'm faking it. Silence. Icy, detached. You've always been so dramatic, Mom finally said. Sharon didn't ask you to climb mountains with a baby on your shoulders. She just asked for a little help. You're part of the family. And family is a sacrifice. I could feel tears running down my face, but they didn't bring relief. I wasn't crying, I was dripping like melted ice, melting away in my impotence. Mom, I can't be the one who always sacrifices herself for others. I'm not made of iron. I don't have to. Well, then you've made your choice, she replied dryly. I hope you're proud of him. And she hung up. Left in silence, I sat on a kitchen chair, holding a mug with both hands. The tea got cold, and I kept staring at one point, not seeing anything. My thoughts were spinning like a broken record. I was always on the sidelines. When Sharon was sick, I gave in. When Sharon left, I helped with Ben. When my parents were fighting, I smoothed out the corners. It's always me. I always adjust. I always put up with it. And now, when for the first time in my life I really needed support, I was dubbed an egotist. Maybe I was really wrong. Maybe all these years I've been living in the illusion that family is a pillar. But now I saw that for them, family is not about love. It's about duty, about convenience, about usage. And if you suddenly decide not to be comfortable, you're crossed out. I wiped my face and, leaning on my crutches, moved back to the living room. She took a deep breath and turned on the TV, not to watch, but to drown out the ringing emptiness in her head. I still didn't know what to do next. But I knew one thing for sure, I wouldn't let myself be used anymore. Even if you have to pay for it with loneliness. I was lying on the couch, wrapped in a gray fleece blanket that had already become my constant companion. The room smelled of weak mint tea and a kind of hopeless loneliness, as if the air itself was tired of waiting for me to finally get up and come back to life. The light of a winter day filtered through the window into the living room, dim, almost colorless, like my thoughts. I felt de-energized. Even the tears dried up, not because the pain was gone, but because it seemed to me that there was no point in reacting to it anymore. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Not timid, not indecisive, but confident and loud, as if whoever was standing outside knew that he was welcome here. I struggled up, groped for my crutches, and, grunting, moved to the door. When I got there, I looked through the peephole and almost burst into tears with relief. Jason. And next to him is Martha. They both stood with their hands full, bags, boxes, thermos. I opened the door, and Martha, without even waiting for a greeting, exclaimed, "Why didn't you tell us anything?" "I didn't want to bother you," I whispered, embarrassed, like a schoolgirl caught in a petty lie. "Bother you?" Jason raised his eyebrows. We're friends." "That's exactly what we want to know when you're feeling bad." They came into the house like the wind, bringing with them warmth, the smell of apple pie, and lively movement. Martha put the bags on the kitchen table and immediately began to sort them. Here's a chicken noodle soup. Here's the lasagna you like. Here's a salad, but it needs to be kept in the fridge. And we brought you tea. The one with cinnamon that you brewed last December, remember? I stood in the hallway, leaning on a crutch, and watched this scene with the feeling that I was in a movie. There were sounds in the house again, footsteps, the rustle of packages, voices. Jason came over to me and carefully took the crutches from me. Let me guess, haven't you learned how to handle them properly yet? What is it? He asked, grinning. Let's just say I can only crawl with them, I replied, smiling weakly. Then sit down. This will be the first lesson. The shape of the support, the step, the balance. I'll show you everything. My grandfather walked with crutches. I assisted. Consider yourself in good hands. I obeyed, sat down in a chair and let him explain, show, and guide me. His tone was gentle but confident. Without a hint of pity, without condescension. It was so unusual that I even felt something begin to blossom inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time: respect. Respect for yourself as a person who deserves patience. Meanwhile, Martha put everything in the fridge, put the kettle on, and brought me a cup. She sat down next to him. Emily, she began, I do not know how to say this without getting angry, but how could your family possibly leave you alone in the state? They think I'm exaggerating, I managed, staring into the cup. Sharon wanted me to babysit Ben. Mom said I was being dramatic. What? Martha exclaimed. You have a cast on your leg. You're barely moving. It's not even just heartless, it's kind of cruel. I shrugged, feeling something shift inside me with every word. It was like I was trapped under rubble, and these two were slowly clearing the rubble. I've always been there, back up, I continued. If something happens to Sharon, I'll back it up. If my parents need anything, I'll come and help. And now that I can't, everything is falling apart. They're angry. But not at yourself, at me. For not being able to be useful. Martha took my hand and squeezed it. It's not normal, Em. It's not love. A real family is not those who demand, it's those who are nearby. You're here, I said softly, feeling the tears that hadn't been there in the morning suddenly come back. Yes, Jason replied. And we'll be there. Look, we'll make a schedule. I'm on Monday and Wednesday, Martha is on Tuesday and Friday. On the weekend, one of us. You won't be alone. Neither physically nor mentally. Those words penetrated me deeply, like the warmth of a campfire on a cold evening. I nodded, not trusting my voice. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone really cared. That I'm not a burden, not an inconvenience. That they see me. The real one. Not by function, not by benefit, but simply as a person. We had lunch together. Jason put lasagna on the stove, Martha sliced bread, and I just sat at the table, listened to their conversations and allowed myself to be a participant in this moment. Without guilt. Without making excuses. That evening, after they left, I sat on the couch for a long time, wrapped in a blanket, with a cup of that cinnamon tea. I looked at their containers left in the fridge, at the clean sink, at the warm notes stuck on the fridge, and thought, family is not always about blood. Sometimes it is born out of kindness. Out of loyalty. Someone who stays when others leave. And in this quiet house, which was so empty yesterday, I felt for the first time that I was not alone. I'm important. I am loved. And maybe I'm starting to find what I've been looking for all my life. It's been exactly a week since Jason and Martha walked through my door, bringing with them warmth, the smell of home-cooked food, and the certainty that I'm no longer alone. The days passed slowly, but they no longer seemed unbearable. I learned to move around the house with a little more confidence, I learned how to sit down and get up without suffering, how to walk around the kitchen table without knocking everything in my path. The world has become quieter, but this silence has ceased to be the enemy. She became my refuge. The morning it all happened started like the others. I was lying on the couch with a cup of coffee, listening to a radio program about the weather. It was February outside, but the sun was pouring down on the windowsill, painting golden patterns on the carpet. It seemed to me that the day would be calm. It seemed to me that the worst was over. The phone rang at 9:12. Sharon is on the screen. I stared at the name for a while, not daring to answer, but then I brushed it off with my finger anyway. Emily, hi. Her voice sounded surprisingly cheerful, almost cheerful. We have great news. David and I are going to Hawaii. The 10th anniversary, can you imagine? 2 weeks in paradise. I'm glad for you, I replied dryly, already feeling where everything was going. Well, we thought it would be better for you to sit with Ben for the time being. You're home recovering anyway, so why not? He's on vacation, so school's not a problem. We'll bring him in on Sunday morning. Sharon, you're not listening. I'm still in a cast. I can't take care of the baby, especially for 2 weeks. I can hardly cook my own food. You're not going to run marathons. Just sit with him. He plays by himself. He only needs food and a place to sleep. It's not that hard. I'm saying no, I said clearly. That's impossible. I'm still on crutches. It's not up for discussion. Well, then we'll have to find someone else at the last moment. You're always so selfish, Emily. You always think only of yourself. I didn't answer. I just disconnected the call and put the phone on the table. My heart was beating faster, but inside I no longer had the panic that I used to have. Just fatigue and determination. I knew the conversation wouldn't end there. And I was right. That evening, around 6, the doorbell rang. Carefully leaning on my crutches, I reached the entrance and peered through the peephole. My heart leapt. Sharon, David, and Ben were standing in the doorway. The boy was holding a backpack with dinosaurs in his hands and chewing on a corner of a sweater. Sharon was smiling, tight and predatory. David stood there with a stony face. I opened the door a crack, but I didn't remove the crutch I was using to block the passage. What are you doing here? I asked, trying to stay calm. We decided to drop Ben off today. We have an early flight tomorrow morning, Sharon replied, as if it had already been decided. I already told you no. I'm not able to. Emily, David said, it's only for 2 weeks. Don't complicate it. We are really tired, we need this rest. My leg is broken, I emphasized. I'm having a hard time coping with myself. I can't take responsibility for the child. We don't have anyone else, Sharon said irritably. Mom and Dad are overseeing the renovation of our house. Friends are busy. You were supposed to help out. It's not my problem, I said. I told you no. I repeat once again, if you try to leave the child with me, I will call the police. This will be considered as leaving the child in danger. You could lose custody, Sharon. She stared at me as if I'd hit her. You wouldn't dare. Try it, I replied softly, not looking away. Ben stood between them, his lips pressed together. He looked confused, scared. I looked at him and felt a pang of pain, not from guilt, but from the realization that he, too, had become a hostage to other people's decisions. You're ruining everything. Sharon shouted. You're ruining our anniversary with your stubbornness. It's not my fault that you didn't take care of the baby before you bought the tickets, I said. It's your choice. Not mine. I slammed the door shut. There was a thud outside, as someone kicked in an angry outburst. Then the screams. I was leaning against the door, my heart pounding in my throat. I've never felt so exhausted, and at the same time, so confident in myself. A few hours later, I received a message from my mother. I opened it, and it was long and full of anger. She wrote that I had disappointed them all, that I was no longer considered part of the family, that my ego had destroyed everything: trust, love, relationships. The father, as usual, did not intervene directly, but put an end to the message. "It was your choice, Emily. Don't expect us to reach out later." I've read it twice. And then, she laughed. Quietly, sincerely. It was almost liberating. I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. I was no longer the one who always offered my shoulder, even when I was on my knees. I chose myself. And even if it cost me my family, I probably never really had one. I can't say for sure when pain stopped being the center of my life. It didn't happen overnight. There wasn't a magical moment when I woke up and suddenly realized that I was whole again. Everything happened gradually, like the melting of snow in March, subtly, slowly, but inevitably. The first morning without a sharp pain with every movement. The first day I was able to pour myself a cup of coffee without spilling a drop. It was the first time I laughed sincerely, without the tiredness that clung to every sound. Physical therapy has become my new ritual. Twice a week, I hobbled, literally at first, then more confidently, to a clinic on the outskirts of the city, where Marcus, an instructor with warm eyes and a patient smile, met me. He didn't talk much, but his hands knew exactly how to support, how to direct, how to demand more than you think you can. He didn't feel sorry for me, and that was his main kindness. "Great, Emily," he would say after a particularly difficult exercise. "You're stronger than you look. I'm just helping you remember it." And really, I started to remember. Not only how to walk, how to keep your balance, but also how to breathe, how to laugh, how to be yourself without fear and without guilt. How to allow yourself to want. In the 4th week, I received a letter from Sarah, my boss. She wrote, "We miss you. As soon as you feel ready, come back. Your place is waiting for you here." And I felt it. I put on my best coat, put on flat boots, took a crutch, now there's only one, and drove to the office. I was worried, as if it was the first day of work in my life. When I entered, I was greeted with applause. Seriously. Sarah brought cupcakes. Jason decorated my table with flowers from paper napkins. Someone put a note on my monitor: "Welcome back, heroine." I laughed, hiding my eyes so that no one could see how moist they were. There was more warmth in this simple, sincere care than my family had given me in my entire life. This place, with its noise, coffee, jokes, was a real home where I was not superfluous, not guilty, not obligated. I was a part of something alive, and it filled me with new strength. Martha, as promised, did not leave me without attention. She signed us both up for yoga classes. The first workout was excruciating. My body stretched like a rope, every muscle screamed, and I giggled softly as I fell onto the mat, looking at Martha, who performed the dog pose face down as if she had been born into it. We came out after class, flushed, with bottles of water, and I said, I thought I was no longer capable of anything new. I knew I could. "You just forgot," she replied, slapping me on the shoulder. I was really forgetting myself. I forgot that I can dream. To dream, and to realize. So one of the first things I did was buy a ticket to Aspen. Alone. For April. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but the very thought of a trip, of new landscapes, of the silence of the mountains and the crunch of morning snow under my feet made me feel like I was finally pushing aside the walls in which I had lived for too long. I started drawing. Not for anyone. Not for show. Just because one evening, looking at the raindrops on the glass, I felt like I wanted to take a brush and transfer them to paper. I bought the simplest set of watercolors and an album. The first works were clumsy, like children's drawings. But with each new attempt, I felt like I was pulling out something real, untold. Lines, colors, shades, all this was my voice, which remained silent for so long. The book club has become another little miracle. It was hosted by an elderly woman named Loretta, whose voice was like a warm blanket, and in whose living room people of different ages and destinies gathered. We discussed novels, argued about characters, laughed and drank tea with biscuits. I felt like I was part of something amazing. No one had any questions about my past. They didn't ask me about my family. I was just accepted. Just the way I am. And, perhaps, it was the most healing. I thought that stopping communication with my family would hurt longer. That deep down I'll be waiting for them to write, call, apologize. But every day I realized, I don't need forgiveness, I don't need a return. I just need to live. And I live. One evening, lying in the bathtub, I closed my eyes and asked myself, who am I now? The answer came easily. I am a woman who has persevered. Which refused to be comfortable. Who allowed herself to be vulnerable, and became stronger. Who found a foothold where she least expected it. I'm Emily. And for the first time in many years, that name sounded proud. 3 months have passed since the ice under my foot treacherously disappeared from under me, and with it all the illusions on which I had been trying to build a relationship with my own family for years. During this time, the world around me has not changed. Pigeons are still cooing on the windowsill in the morning, cars are honking on the highway in the evening, the neighbor's boy is still rolling his skateboard along the driveway, leaving a trail of scratches and ringing laughter. But inside of me, everything has become different. It was as if I had lived my life anew, in which I had finally found my place, my breath, my silence. The phone rang on a warm, lazy afternoon, when I was wrapped in a blanket, reading a new novel from the book club on the veranda. Spring has come into its own, young, bright, with moist earth underfoot, with lilacs exploding in purple tassels in the corner of the garden. A name appeared on the screen, Aunt Allison. I haven't seen her for many years, except in random family photos sent on holidays. She lived in North Carolina, rarely came, but in my childhood she was always that rare adult whose hugs were real and whose words were warm. Emily, dear, her voice sounded a little hoarse on the phone, but still with the same shade of benevolence that I remembered from childhood. I needed to talk to you. I heard from June. Well, you can probably guess. I grinned at the pattern of sunlight on the wooden railing. That I refused to sit with Ben for no reason and ruined everyone's life. That I'm an egoist who destroys family ties. Yes, that's about it. Allison sighed. But I didn't believe it. It's not like you. I wanted to hear your version. Your truth. And I told him. Without pathos, without tears, calmly, as they tell a story with which they have already reconciled. About the fall. About the pain. About how no one offered help, but everyone demanded it. About Jason, Martha, and how friends have become closer to family. About Sharon, who tried to leave the baby at my door, and how for the first time in my life I said, no, not out of resentment, but out of the need to save myself. About the message from my parents, where they crossed me out like a written sheet. And about how easy it became for me after that. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. And then Allison said, "Oh, my God. Emily, I'm sorry. I didn't even know. I don't have the words. I don't need them anymore," I replied quietly. "Thanks for calling. I'll talk to the others. This is wrong. You're not alone, and you shouldn't feel guilty." "I don't feel it anymore," I confessed, and suddenly realized that it was true. After the conversation, I sat for a long time, listening to the wind blowing petals on the porch. My garden was not yet well maintained, the grass grew unevenly, and there were dry leaves in some places, but still this place breathed life. It was mine. Like me, I belonged to myself again. There were no voices inside, no accusations, no expectations. Neither her mother, with her icy demands to be a comfortable daughter, nor Sharon, with her childish resentment, which she hid behind insults. I no longer lived in their shadow. I didn't look at the phone. I didn't wonder if they would write, if they would regret it. I no longer yearned to reconnect, as if my existence depended on it. The connection was cut off, and I survived. Moreover, I've blossomed. I thought about Jason, with his endless jokes and his ability to cook breakfast in such a way that even porridge became an event. About Martha, with her phrases as clear as a surgical scalpel and her soft look when I was tired of pretending that I was coping. About yoga classes, where for the first time in many years I listened to my body, and not to the commands of others. About the upcoming trip to Aspen, the ticket for which was in the drawer and which I craved as much as I once craved my mother's approval. Only now the thirst was sweet, free, not riddled with fear. I woke up early the next morning. For the first time in a long time, not because of the pain, not from the ringing of alarms in my head, but from the whisper of rain on the roof. I put on a sweater, got a cup of coffee, and went out onto the porch. The lilacs were fragrant, and the air was moist and cool. I just sat there and watched. The drops sliding on the leaves. At the sky, painted in pearl gray shades. At the life happening here and now, without strain, without guilt. At that moment, I realized that everything I had gone through was not the end. It was a transition. Not a fall, but a liberation. Sometimes you have to break down to figure out where the real cracks are. And sometimes, in this very fragility, a power is born that no longer needs anyone's confirmation. I was no longer trying to be a good daughter, an ideal sister, or a comfortable person. I was just there. I'm Emily. And in this simplicity there was everything: peace, acceptance, joy. Real life. My life.